Chapter 41 Experiential Training. 2. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The instant that Elder Li Hong had shouted, "Forward," all 10 groups were moving hastily in front. Shen Lai's group was also no exception in this. The problem was, this was the mountain wilderness and there was only one path for the time being. It was not long before the 10 groups were slowly being split up as more and paths had appeared. Shen Lai was surprisingly agile and he was moving faster than his own group had anticipated. In fact, Jiaying was quite astonished that Shen Lai was moving on the rocky dirt track as though he was walking on an even ground. Instead of Shen Lai, who was not the one that could not catch up, it was several protégés in his group that were unable to catch up with him. Jiaying also had some difficulty catching up with Shen Lai, but each time he would catch her with his grip, she could feel revitalized and so much lighter. This startled her. In this mountain wilderness, many of the protégés were breathless as they entered into the mountains, but not Shen Lai. Although he looked like a weak scholar and he could be knocked down by the strong winds, but he was steadfast with his movements. In fact, he had turned to frown at his group. "We need to hurry fast or we will be the last. Can't the ones at the back move a bit faster? There is nothing difficult about moving up the mountains. You are all not maidens." This put many of the male protégés in his group to shame and they were awkward in the face as they could not even catch up with a scholar like Shen Lai. Most of them were out of breath and they could not even argue with Shen Lai. The most damning part was that Shen Lai was the group leader and if he asked them to be faster, this was his order. If they disobeyed his order to follow him, they could not even complain against him to anyone. His order was simple and that was to follow him tightly. Could they even have the face to tell anyone that they could not follow a weak scholar like Shen Lai? Naturally they could not and dare not as they valued their face. Moreover, Jiaying, the greatest beauty in their cohort, was in their group and this was a slap to their face if they could not even follow behind her. Time quickly passed. It was now only 3 groups that were still taking the same path. They were Xiongba's group number 1, Di Shitian's group number 6 and Shen Lai's group number 10. Except for the strongest cultivators in the 3 groups, many of the cultivators numbering 60 in total were looking exhausted. But Xiongba, Di Shitian and Shen Lai seemed to be in a contest to see who was faster. Di Shitian turned to stare coldly at Shen Lai as he inhaled heavily. "Why are you still following us? Can't you see that your group is tired? You are not the last and moreover we still have 7 days. Why are you in such a hurry?" Shen Lai said gently with the same composure, "Actually I am not following you. You are following me. I think you look more tired than me. Why don't you take a break first instead?" Then he laughed as he pointed at the peak in front of them, "But since you are not tired, why don't we race to that peak instead?" Di Shitian. "You are crazy." Di Shitian angrily shouted at Shen Lai and while he was shouting at Shen Lai, he spotted a path that did not require for him to go up the mountains. So he said to his group, "Follow me to that path over there." Then he said coldly to Shen Lai, "Don't you dare to follow me." But before he could finish, Shen Lai had already walked away and was waving his feather fan as he walked to smile at Xiongba. Short Yulai was already giddy from the rapid walk and he was only too glad to follow Di Shitian to an easy path. Many of the female protégés in Di Shitian's group were also relieved when they saw that they did not need to go up the mountain. They were nearly freaked to the death when Shen Lai had suddenly challenged Di Shitian to go up the mountain peak. However, the same could not be said for Shen Lai's group and they were all freaked to the death by now and they were all breathless with hopelessness. They were now cursing. How come this Shen Lai can't seem to get tired? Now it was Xiongba, Chu Feng, Mei Xian, Su Shaoqing and Su Shaoxing turn to be pestered by Shen Lai. Shen Lai waved his feather fan as he smiled at Xiongba, "Why don't we have a race to that peak over there?" Xiongba. Chu Feng. Even for bronze core cultivators, they were also quite tired and breathless now. How come this Shen Lai was not tired at all? Jiaying, who was being gripped by Shen Lai, did not feel tired at all and she was now curious about Shen Lai. it was because she could feel a strong internal profound energy that was coursing into her and she was feeling as fresh as she had just started. What was more, she could feel that her cultivation core was stronger than ever before, as though she was meditating in the mountains and absorbing the thick spiritual auras into her cultivation core. All in all, it was as good as meditating for 1 week in the mountains. She really could not believe it. When Xianxia had told her that he would make her into a saintess, she actually did not believe in him, and it sounded more like a lover's promise than anything else. No one in the entire divine realm could actually brag that they could make another cultivator into a saintess. Also, there were not many saintesses in the entire Fenghua great continent, and many were in the fake saintesses cultivation realm. Xiongba had suddenly said to his group, "We shall take this path here." He had suddenly discovered a hidden path that led downward. When his group saw that this path was actually going down the mountain forest, they were instantly relieved. Xianxia quickly said to Xiongba, "Oh no. I've sensed great danger from this path. This is a most unwise decision. I suggest that you follow me up that peak first." Xiongba angrily interrupted Xianxia, "Xianxia. Are you the leader of my group or I am? How dare you meddle with my decision? And don't you dare to follow us down this easier path since you don't want us to go." Chu Feng hummed coldly, "Danger my foot." Mei Xian was also humming coldly, "I dare you to poke fun at my brother Xiongba again." Xianxia protested immediately, but he was quickly interrupted by the rest of Xiongba's group. Even the twin sisters Su Shaoqing and Su Shaoxing were looking at Xianxia with an ugly look. Jiaying pulled Xianxia away as she said, "You are not their leader. We should try to take care of ourselves first instead." Xianxia sighed softly as he muttered, "If this is their destiny to die here, then so be it." Author note: 1. The experiential training officially starts now. Chapter 42 Experiential Training. 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It was now night in the mountain wilderness. Xianxia said quietly as he waved his feather fan, "Let's set up camp in this place." When he had said that, all the trainee protégés in his group began to fall down in a great show of exhaustion. None of them bothered to set up a campfire, for they were all dead tired. The only exception was Jiaying, and she knew that it was because of Xianxia. Xianxia quietly said to them, "I am going to scout ahead of us for any dangers." Jiaying quickly said after him, "Xianxia, let me follow after you." Xianxia hesitated for a while, "Are you sure that you don't want to rest?" Jiaying added with a firm smile, "I am not tired." Xianxia hesitated for a while before he sighed, "All right. But let's hurry." Jiaying was startled, "Let's hurry? Where?" She was suddenly flustered. Was Xianxia taking her to a dark place so that they could finally copulate with each other? There was an eager anticipation in her eyes as she nodded. As they moved away together, Jiaying asked Xianxia, "Are you bluffing that Xiongba earlier? Is his route really that dangerous?" Xianxia laughed awkwardly, "Actually our route is the most dangerous." Jiaying. She muttered weakly, "Then why did you have to choose this route then?" Xianxia laughed awkwardly when he had heard her. They continued to walk for a while until Jiaying asked him, "We seem to be far away from our camp now. Is this really all right? It may be dangerous if we get too far away." She was flushing as she said that. Xianxia smiled, "We are actually trying to get into the face of danger." Jiaying looked a little perplexed, "Why? Are you a secret martial expert? If we are in danger, you can then protect us." Xianxia laughed awkwardly, "Actually martial arts are my weakness." Jiaying. Xianxia asked her, "You know that martial arts have a 1 to 9 level. First is the strongest. Above the first level, there are also 4 other martial realms, the martial soul realm, the martial pinnacle realm, the divine martial realm and the true martial realm." Jiaying was startled, "I really didn't know about this. No one has taught me this before." "Then what martial realm are you at?" Xianxia laughed softly before he said awkwardly, I am at the 9th level. Jiaing. 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 Isn't this the same as not saying? Shenlai asked her quietly, do you think that the Saintess Xianxia depends on her martial arts or cultivation realm to defeat her opponents? Jiaing pondered for a while before she answered, naturally it is her cultivation realm, am I right? Shenlai smiled, you are not wrong but is only half right. He paused for a while before adding, Saintess Xianxia has a flying lotus profound treasure and she can kill dozens of high-level cultivators in a blink of an eye. Jiaing was startled as she stared at Shenlai, I didn't know about this. How do you know about this? Shenlai laughed gently but did not reply her. He knew all of the profound treasures of the 7 holy saintesses and he had purposely given them several trump cards each so that they would not end up killing one another in the future. All of a sudden Shenlai had waved his hand and a big wooden box had appeared next to him, startling Jiaing. Jiaing gasped, what is this? Shenlai smiled, this is the flying armament box. You can have it. Jiaing was startled, I can have this. Are you sure? Where did you get this? Shenlai laughed softly, I have actually got it from a friend of mine after I have decided to come here. He had better not tell her that it was a crown princess of the demonic race that had given him this profound treasure or he would have a hard time explaining his position. Jiaing smiled, it is only a box. What can it do? Shenlai smiled, you will know very soon. Indeed, there was a sudden howling and a large gigantic moving desolate beast was suddenly seen along with dozens of desolate beasts. And they were prowling in the cool mountain forest that was overlooking them. Obviously they were spotted for they were standing in the open ridge that was facing these desolate beasts. Jiaing was stunned, this is a 7th rank king Fenris wolf and there are dozens of 4th rank desolate Fenris wolves too. I didn't even sense their profound animus until they are near, we can't win. Even one of these 4th rank desolate Fenris wolf is enough to kill us. We can't defeat them or even hurt them with our swords. Their hide is too thick. Shenlai nodded slowly as he waved his feather fan with a soft sigh, even I can't do anything against that 7th rank king Fenris wolf. Jiaing asked him, then why are we here in the first place? Shenlai laughed softly, although we can't do a thing with our martial skills but this box can do the trick. He then gently kicked the box and all of a sudden the big wooden box began to split in all directions, revealing 9 divine swords. When Jiaing saw the divine swords, she was stunned. A divine sword was really very rare in the Fenghua Great Continent and only the important cultivators of the clan would be able to lay their hands on one. Shenlai said quietly, there are 9 flying divine swords here. I call them sword 1 to 9. 1 is the weakest and 9 is the strongest. Sword number 1. Half-step divine sword. Sword number 2. Mortal-step divine sword. Sword number 3. Earth-step divine sword. Sword number 4. Heaven-step divine sword. Sword number 5. Celestial-step divine sword. Sword number 6. Immortal-step divine sword. Sword number 7. Saint-step divine sword. Sword number 8. Emperor-step divine sword. Sword number 9. Deity. Step divine sword. Jiaing was trembling with astonishment, it was because sword 4 onward was extremely rare and she had not heard of anyone having any divine sword above a sword number 5. And he had merely said without being the least mindful that all these divine swords were for her. This was too exaggerated. And what sort of a friend would be so generous to give him such a box of divine swords? But divine swords had a restriction and they would need plenty of profound strength to wield and that would require the cultivator to be a high-level cultivator first. Was Shenlai a high-level cultivator with a powerful profound strength? But if he was such a high-level cultivator, would he require so many divine swords in the first place? Jiaing would get her answer very soon. It was because Shenlai had said to the divine swords in the box, sword number 1 to 9. Heed my divine voice. Fly. When he had said that, all 9 divine swords were suddenly flying now in a circular path, and there were 9 flying swords that were suddenly flying with a tremendous speed toward the group of Fenris wolves. The deity-step flying sword simply cut the 7th-ranked desolate King Fenris wolf in pieces, killing it dead so fast that it could not even regenerate with its cultivation core. In just a few blinks of an eye, dozens of desolate beasts were dead instantly, and all 9 flying swords were back in the wooden box. These flying swords were not simple flying swords, they seemed to have a will on their own as it sought out its targets and would rotate all over the intended vicinity until all their targets were destroyed. Jiaying was completely startled by what she was seeing. However, Xianxia merely said casually to her, "You may not be able to use all 9 of the flying swords with your current cultivation level. But don't worry. When you are a saintess, you can definitely use all but the most powerful of these divine swords." Before Xianxia had finished what he was going to say to her, Jiaying had suddenly fainted. The reason why Jiaying had fainted was because this gift was too heavy, and even if there was a 9th-ranked desolate beast, she was sure that Xianxia would be able to use the deity-step divine sword to kill it. In fact, one strongest divine sword in this wooden box was able to kill all the desolate Fenris wolves. There was no need to use all 9 of the divine swords as flying swords. While the high-level cultivators had to condense their profound energies to create their astonishing killing profound arts, Xianxia had used real divine swords to slice his enemies apart. Author note: 1. Xianxia is stronger than he has looked. 2. There is a crown princess among the demonic race that Xianxia has actually known. Chapter 43 Experiential Training. 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Same night at the campsite of group number 1. Xianxia was fuming angrily that he was being looked down upon by a weak scholar like Xianxia. Chu Feng was also upset, and he had secretly pulled Xianxia next to him, and he was whispering, "After this experiential training, let's arrange for an accident to befall him." Xianxia was suddenly smiling again as he whispered back, "This is a most excellent idea." Chu Feng asked him quietly, "Is it time to affirm the loyalties of our group now?" Xianxia was suddenly grinning coldly, "Alas! I've almost forgotten about this." "Yes. It is indeed the time for it." He had turned to look lecherously at Mei Xian, Su Shaoqing, Su Shaoxing, and the 4 other beautiful female protégées in their group. The 2 of them had shared all 7 of these maidens together because they were the young masters of their respectively celestial sections. However, there are 11 other young masters in their group who were equally eager to feast upon these 7 maidens as well. In secret, the 13 of them had already formed the 13 Luminous Young Masters group, and they sought to dominate the Fenghua Great Continent in the future. Many of the 11 young masters had already put their lecherous sights on Mei Xian, Su Shaoqing, and Su Shaoxing, who were the prettiest in their group. As Xianxia and Chu Feng walked to their campsite, they were already making eye contacts with the other 11 young masters. Xianxia smiled as he grabbed Mei Xian by her waist, while Chu Feng had grabbed Su Shaoqing and Su Shaoxing side by side to him. All of a sudden the 11 other male cultivators had suddenly surrounded the 7 female cultivators, and they were displaying evil grins. Mei Xian snorted coldly, "Xianxia, Chu Feng. What are your followers trying to do? Get them out of my way." All of a sudden Xianxia had caught hold of Neck and had slammed her onto a tree before pulling off her dress to display her naked in front of the others. She was suffocating for breath and could not even speak. Su Shaoqing was so startled that she was shouting, "Xianxia! What are you doing?" But before she could finish, she was struck to the ground by Chu Feng, and so was Su Shaoxing. Su Shaoqing gasped with shock, "Chu Feng, what are you doing?" Chu Feng grinned, and at the same time the other 4 maidens were being surrounded by the other 11 young masters. He said, "What is the difference between sleeping with Xianxia and with 11 others? Tonight, we are going to tie all of you naked in this mountain wilderness and to feast upon all of you." When he had said that, all 7 maidens were shocked with disbelief. Xianxia hummed coldly, "You didn't think that you are the only maidens that we have played with. You are all our playthings. It is your privilege to serve the 13 luminous young masters. In the future, we will be the masters of the Fenghua Great Continent. Then he shouted, tie all 7 of these maidens naked on the tree. All 7 maidens were shocked. They had never expected that Xiongba and Chu Feng would be such a beast of a man behind their handsome faces. The very reason why they were willing to follow Chu Feng and Xiongba were because they were the lofty young masters of their celestial sex and it benefited them to have a connection with them. But they did not know that Xiongba and Chu Feng had an even bigger picture on their agenda, and they had even secretly formed the 13 Luminous Young Masters group and called themselves the Luminous. In just a few short minutes, all 7 maidens were tied and hung naked in a row in front of these 13 young masters. Mei Xian cried woefully, Chu Feng, Xiongba. The 2 of you are bastards and deserve to die a most horrible death. But Xiongba merely laughed aloud, it is a pity to kill you. If you have been more submissive and is willing to be our depraved slave, then I would consider sparing you. But unfortunately, you have chosen to humiliate me instead. Mei Xian cursed loudly, yes, kill me please. I rather not be a whore. When she had said that, several maidens were whimpering, we are willing to be your whores. Just don't kill us. Su Shaoqing and Su Shaoxing however agreed with Mei Xian as they cried woefully, we will never be your depraved slaves or whores. All of a sudden Chu Feng and several young masters were startled and they saw dozens of beast men were seen moving into their vicinity and they were attempting to surround them from all sides. Even Xiongba was stunned. One must know that even a beast man had the same combat level as a bronze core cultivator or even stronger. Plus they could easily regenerate their wounds too. Also, they were not sure if there were any wolverines among the beastmen as well. Also beastmen were known for their excellent tracking abilities too. Chu Feng quickly panicky said, let's beat a hasty retreat first. The beastmen are known for their lecherous appetite. When they see these 7 naked maidens hanging from the free, they won't bother to track us down. Hurry. We need to decide quickly before it is too late for us. Xiongba agreed and he was shouting to all the other young masters, let's us go now. It is a pity that we have to spare these whores. Some of the maidens were pleading to Xiongba, please don't leave us here. But Xiongba, Chu Feng and the rest of the young masters had already fled like the wind. Very soon, these 7 maidens were surrounded by dozens of beastmen and these beastmen were drooling with delight when they saw these 7 beautiful naked maidens hanging from the trees. Mei Xian was sobbing tearfully, it is over for us now. This caused the rest of the maidens to wail even loudly. Just as the beastmen were about to feast upon these 7 beautiful maidens, a handsome scholarly young man had suddenly stepped into the vicinity and he was saying, luckily, I have made it in time here. This young man was indeed Shenlai. He had rushed here alone after killing the threat from the Fenris wolves earlier. He had told Jiang to go back to their campsite first and this time, he had insisted that she should not follow him by jumping off a steep cliff. When Mei Xian saw he was actually Shenlai, she cried out. Run, you fool! There was no way a weak scholar like Shenlai was able to defeat so many beastmen. Not even a gold core expert like Elder Hua Zixia would be able to defeat so many beastmen on her own. Shenlai waved his feather fan and hundreds of secret small projectiles began to fly in all directions, piercing and killing dozens of beastmen instantly. When the rest of the beastmen saw this scene, they were so terrified that they had began to flee panicky. Mei Xian gasped, isn't this Saintess Qian Yufeng's secret projectile technique the explosive flying rain secret array? Shenlai laughed weakly as he waved his feather fan, this is much weaker than what she is capable of doing. And it has only one use. All the 7 maidens. What if there were more enemies around? Shenlai had suddenly walked past them and had waved his feather fan upward to sever the ropes that were tying them to the trees. It was really clean and they were all surprised that Shenlai was capable of such a precision cut. All 7 maidens were thinking. Isn't Shenlai incapable of any martial arts? They had never seen him practicing any martial arts and he had fared so terribly for his first chi cultivation lesson. Xianxia actually had his back turned against them and he was saying gently, "Fellow protégé sisters, I think that you ought to put on your clothes first." When he had said that, all 7 of the naked maidens were all flustered and they were quickly gathering or getting new clothing from their spatial rings. Xianxia on the other hand was wondering, there is someone else in this vicinity but now she is gone now. Xiongba, Chu Feng and the 11 other young masters were running in the mountain wilderness when all of a sudden, an extremely beautiful maiden had appeared in front of them with a flash and in her hand, was a heaven-step divine sword. Xiongba was startled but he was soon grinning, "Heroine, we have just encountered the beast men not far away from here." All 12 other young masters were also grinning as they eyed this extremely beautiful maiden. She was really very beautiful and was just like a fairy. Chu Feng asked, "Heroine, you are just a fairy. May we know what is your name?" The extremely beautiful maiden answered slowly, "Fairy Xiangyun from the Saintess Palace." As well as Sword Saintess Xiangyun. When all 13 young masters had heard her name, they were all startled that they had actually met one of the 2 most beautiful peonies here. Together with Fairy Yushuwan, this was what everyone was calling them for they were like 2 fairies that were dancing on 2 lovely flowers. And Fairy Xiangyun was also one of the 12 extreme beauties in the Fenghua Great Continent. Fairy Xiangyun had suddenly raised her sword and with one wave of her sword, she had sent a profound wave onto the 13 young masters, instantly ripping all of them apart. When they were dead, they did not even know the reason why. "Scums," she casually remarked before turning her back away. Her mind was still on the handsome man that she had seen earlier who had rescued the 7 naked maidens. Maybe not all of them are scums after all. She had only one objective by coming to the holy land of the Holy Maiden Sanctuary and that was to find and kill Xianxia to avenge the wrongs of her saintess Beitang Fang. Author note. 1. This is a fairly long chapter. Chapter 44 Experiential Training. 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Xianxia had rescued Mei Xian, Su Shaoqing, Su Shaoxing and the 4 other maidens, he did not linger and he had immediately returned to his group. But before he had left, he was seen moving his fingers rapidly and he said to them, "I am afraid that the rest of your group had met with a mishap. But don't worry, the assailant won't linger in the place and you can still find the group flag there. In this way, you won't fail the experiential training." This left Mei Xian and her group with a loss on what to do next. However, they had decided to follow Xianxia's advice to look for the rest of their group. Indeed, when they had found Xiong Chu and Chu Feng, they could no longer recognize them anymore. It was because they were all ripped apart and all 13 of the newly formed secret luminous young masters group had all died most horribly. And it was exactly as Xianxia had said, they had indeed found the group flag. Mei Xian was stunned. How did Xianxia know all this and he had even saved all their lives here? All 7 of the maidens were dumbfounded and they were all beginning to see Xianxia in a new light now and they could no longer bring themselves to disdain or bully Xianxia anymore. Lo elderly Hong was now alone with 2 of her male assistant elders and they were watching the mountains quietly. The other 2 female assistant elders were not with them but were in the mountains so they would be able to come to the timely help of the trainee experiential groups once they had trigged the flags early. The names of the 2 male assistant elders were Liang Buheo and Do Mak, they were both silver core stage cultivators. As they were males, they were unable to enter the inner courts of the Holy Maiden Sanctuary. Also these 2 males were quite old males and they had served the previous sect leader when their sect was changed to the Holy Maiden Sanctuary. As they were still silver core cultivators after such a long time, their cultivation talents were naturally mediocre and even elderly Hong who was in the early gold core stage was younger than them by over 70 years. Luckily for the cultivators, every time they had a breakthrough in their cultivation, they would age much slower and live much longer. When cultivators reached the gold core stage, they would no longer age so much or even cease to age completely. At this point, they would also no longer require any food or water for a long time. However, for them to actually reach the next stage of Yuan Yin, it was extremely hard, and this was almost an impassable barrier between the true genius and the hardworking. It was because only roughly 10% of the cultivators could reach this stage. This 10% would continue until the awakened stage. The next stage after the awakened stage was the saint/saintess level. Again, this was an impassable barrier. Only 1% of the cultivators could hope to overcome this lofty cultivation realm, but 99% of them were doomed to enter the fake saint/saintess stage. Although a fake saint/saintess stage was still much stronger than cultivators of the awakened stage, but they could no longer be able to contest with the true saint/saintess stage cultivators. As a matter of fact, once a fake always a fake, they could no longer be able to advance to the true cultivation realm of the sage saint/sage saintess and the grand sage saint/grand sage saintess. Even if they could be promoted in the future, only roughly 0.01% of them would be able to advance to the next fake cultivation stage. And that would take them a long time. Even for a true saint/saintess, the next cultivation realm was like an impassable barrier. Only 0.01% of them could actually succeed in reaching the next cultivation realm, and 99% of them would be destined to fall into the fake sage saint/sage saintess level. That was also the main reason why the 7 holy saintesses were able to quickly become the dominant force in overtaking the Fenghua Great Continent, as they were met with little opposition. Their strategy was extremely simple at the beginning, and that was forming a group to destroy all the oppositions before partitioning the Fenghua Great Continent into 7 main domains among themselves. Even when they were up against a stronger cultivator or a really strong group of cultivators, there were few celestial sects that could actually withstand 7 true saintesses who had nothing to lose in the first place. No one in the Fenghua Great Continent knew anything about the past of the 7 holy saintesses and where did they come from. But one thing was certain: it was better to submit to their profound strength rather than to resist them, because they were also in possessing of some really terrifying profound treasures that could easily wipe out a cultivator of the same profound strength. And no one wanted to offend 7 powerful true saintesses at the same time. Time passed, and 100 years have now passed. Many of the lowly cultivators have already forgotten about the events that occurred 100 years ago, except for the older cultivators that remembered the days when the celestial clans were less united and had more influences over their neighboring celestial sections. At the same time, when the 7 holy lands were formed in the Fenghua Great Continent, the attacks from the demonic sects had also lessened, mainly because humanity was now stronger and more united than ever before. And the 7 holy saintesses were sometimes extremely vengeful when it served their moods. The Saintess Palace, for example, was one of the 3 most powerful holy lands in the Fenghua Great Continent, and they had killed numerous demonic cultivators that dared to venture into their sphere of influence, and had even expanded into the territories of the demonic sections. Fairy Xiangyun, or Sword Saint Xiangyun of the Saintess Palace, may not be a saintess level yet and was only short 1 cultivation realm to become a full saintess, but she was already greatly feared among the demonic cultivators. Her one strike, the Blossoms of the Heaven Blight, was extremely feared among the demonic cultivators. Nowadays even the demonic cultivators know that they had to avoid the top 3 holy lands, or else their vengeance would surely come really quick. It was because there were also numerous powerful cultivators under the 7 holy saintesses. It was said that the young cultivators of the Fenghua Great Continent worshipped the 7 holy saintesses while the old cultivators feared them. At this moment, Liang Boheo and Do Mak had suddenly pulled Elder Li Hong into the cave, and they were undressing her. Elder Li Hong protested weakly, "What if the others have returned?" Although she had said that, her panties were already wet when they had removed her robe and thrown it on the ground. Liang Boheo laughed, "Will they return so soon? Will they disobey us?" Do Mak grinned as he had pulled the panties off Elder Li Hong and had stripped her naked. "Don't you desire us with your heart?" Elder Li Hong said slowly, "It is my misfortune to know the 2 of you. Without us, can you become an elder of the Holy Maiden Sanctuary in the first place?" Liang Boheo smiled as he admired the wet holy land between her 2 legs. When he had said that, Elder Li Hong stopped even her feeble resistance as she was pushed onto the cave wall as the 2 men began to fondle all over her. Domak smiled, have you forgotten how your father the Grand Elder of our former sect had died while defending the glory of our sect while our former sect leader has chosen to surrender our sect to Saintess Xianxia? Moreover, do you want our Saintess to know about your dirty affair with us? Elderly Hong bit her lips as she resisted the urge to moan lewdly when Liang Buheo had suddenly entered her from behind. Let's have some fun together. Domak whispered in her ears, in this cohort, we have so many beautiful young protégés that are not even 20. Jiaying, Mei Xian, Xiaoqing and Su Xiaoxing. I want you to lure them to us so that we can feast upon their young flesh. Elderly Hong was startled, don't. They are innocent. Domak frowned as he pinched both of her erected nipples, this isn't the first time that you have betrayed your own protégés. If you do as we have said, we will let you play with that Xianlai. How about it? Elderly Hong resisted replying for a while before she moaned aloud, all right then. Then she started to moan lewdly, harder please. She had already started to spurt her lewd juices uncontrollably by the touches of these two middle-aged men. Author note. 1. Things are not that simple in this experiential training. Chapter 45 Secret of the Wooden Box. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Later in the night, Xianlai was already back to his group campsite. Most of the protégés in his group was already sound asleep except for Jiaying and the ones that were keeping the night watch during the night. When Jiaying saw Xianlai, she was delighted and she was looking at him weirdly. When they were alone in one corner of their campsite, she began to say to Xianlai. Are you sure that you want to give me this wooden box? This is obviously a profound treasure and I am too weak to even use it. Inside the box are all renowned divine swords and I can't accept something as precious as this. Even though Jiaying was the young mistress of her celestial sect but her celestial sect was small and also dirt poor. Even owning a divine sword was like a lofty dream. When her celestial sect was stronger, they did have a couple of divine swords but their patriarchs had lost their divine swords in some faraway expeditions, trials or battles. Currently, there were no divine swords in her celestial sect. Xianlai took a curious look at her before returning a smile, naturally it is for you. When you are a saintess, this wooden box will be helpful to you. Jiang inhaled softly, do you think that I have the talent to become a saintess? I don't think so. I am only an average cultivator. Xianlai smiled, you will be and I will help you. Jiang smiled weakly as she looked with disbelief at Xianlai. I don't understand. You are a lowly cultivator but you are able to use the divine swords in the wooden box. What cultivation realm are you really at? Xianlai laughed awkwardly as he tried to look heroic, I am Grand Sage Saint Xianlai. Jiang giggled softly when she had heard him, I don't believe you. Xianlai. Jiang looked at him curiously, can you show me your profound animus? Then I can know your cultivation realm. Xianlai smiled weakly, I don't have. Jiang. Xianlai really did not lie to Jiang, his martial foundation was as weak as the sand and he could not display his profound animus. Xianlai said weakly, I am a soul cultivator and not a martial cultivator. Ha! Jiaying's beautiful thin eyebrows were perplexed, what is a soul cultivator? Xianlai was immediately spirited, a soul cultivator is a cultivator that cultivates the great Tao of the soul. Jiaying asked weakly, what is the great Tao of the soul? Xianlai answered awkwardly, just be yourself. Jiaying. Jiang decided to ask another question, this wooden box. Do you know of its origin? I have never seen anything like this before. There are 9 divine swords in this wooden box and an empty slot. But weirdly, the last slot in the box looked too big for any swords. Xianlai began to ponder before answering, actually when I have this wooden box, there are actually no divine swords inside. After I noticed that this wooden box can hide the profound animus of the divine swords inside, I started to put the divine swords inside. The last slot is actually for a big scabbard. Jiang blinked her eyes as she interrupted, didn't you say that you have borrowed this wooden box? Xianxia laughed, I did. Because I have given it away. But the new owner insists that I bring this wooden box along for my protection. And you are giving it to me. Jiang had a blank expression as she looked at Xianxia. Xianxia smiled, that is because I am going to make you into a saintess and be part of my Carnation Goddess painting. Jiang asked softly, what is this Carnation Goddess painting all about? This was something that she did not have the chance to ask properly the last time. Xianxia smiled, I am going to paint the naked figures of the 7 of the most beautiful saintesses in the Fenghua Great Continent in this Carnation Goddess painting, and I am going to pick one of them to be my Carnation Goddess. And they need to be chaste saintesses as well. Jiang. 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 Why do you want to something this lewd? Jiang was stunned. And what make you think a lofty chaste saintess will strip for you? Xianxia smiled, this is not lewd at all. Jiang. 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 Xianxia continued with a soft chuckle, I will give these saintesses an option to pose for me or to be my depraved slave. Jiang. 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 I really can't believe that I am hearing this. Then she asked with a look that was full of bewilderment, why do you need to pick a Carnation Goddess? Xianxia solemnly said, my Carnation Goddess will be my Tao partner and we will rule this Fenghua Great Continent together. Jiang had suddenly thrown the wooden box at Xianxia and there were shimmering tears in her eyes, take this back. Xianxia was startled, why? Jiang had got up with a hurt look, if I lose my chaste body to you, then are you saying that I can't be your Carnation Goddess anymore? In order to be your Carnation Goddess, I have to pose naked in front of 6 other maidens. I don't care if they are saintesses or not. I don't even care if I am a saintess or not. So goodbye. When she had said that, she had started to walk away. In her heart, she was crying, it was because she really liked Xianxia and was willing to give up her chaste body to him. But Xianxia was actually telling that she needed to be a saintess first and he would not be touching her because she needs to be chaste first. She could accept posing the lewd part but she could not accept being the chaste part. And why Xianxia could not pick a harem instead of sticking with only one Carnation Goddess? But Xianxia did not go after her, it was because he was thinking of the identity of his Carnation Goddess that had her back facing him and he could never capture her alluring slim body. He could only weakly say, maybe Maiden Jiang is not the one. The day that he could complete the Carnation Goddess painting was the day that he could choose his Carnation Goddess and completed his 100th profound treasure Great Tao. And the boundary of his cultivation realm would also increase to a new height. But after seeing Jiang in tears, he had also remembered the bitter tears that were dripped by Saintess Xianxia in his soul sea. Xianxia trembled as he began to question himself slowly, but I am a cultivator that pursues the ultimate Tao of my own cultivation, am I right? Or this world has no need of a soul cultivator like me anymore. Author note. 1. Xianxia is confused right now. 2. What is Ji Yuan's wooden box doing here? 3. Happy 2023 New Year. Chapter 46 The Two Holy Saintesses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the Holy Maiden Sanctuary. The two holy saintesses, Saintess Xianxia and Saintess Qian Yufeng, were alone with each other and the two of them had a brooding look. They were both the extreme beauties of the Fenghua Great Continent and their mere presence would cause all men, whether humans or demons, to look at them with great desires. Right now, they were looking unhappily with each other. Saintess Qian Yufeng raised her fist, so this is the very reason why you have suddenly cancelled our alliance. To think that I was so worried that you may be a hostage or become a puppet. And that is why I am here. If I have not come, then I won't know that Xianxia is actually right here with you. Saintess Xianxia smiled weakly, why don't you come one day later? Saintess Qian Yufeng hummed coldly, then I won't be able to see Xianxia anymore, am I right? Because he will be in his experiential training right now, right? Saintess Xianxia pretended to be hurt, Sister Saintess Yufeng, how can you say such a thing to me? I am merely trying to protect you against Xianxia. That is right, I am protecting you against his evils. Saintess Qian Yufeng laughed coldly, what do you mean? The touches of Xianxia on her was still lingering on her and she could still remember how glad she was in seeing Xianxia again. Saintess Xianfian said with a sigh, Xianxia has come back to finish his Carnation Goddess painting. I have refused and he. She had suddenly burst into tears, and he has made me into his depraved slave. Even the upper leadership of my small holy land have all become his depraved slaves. I really don't want my sister Saintess here to become his depraved slave here, so I try to warn you away, but you still fall for it anyway. Saintess Qian Yufeng was startled and her beautiful golden eyes began to stare at Saintess Xianfian with disbelief, really? Seriously? Saintess Xianfian pretended to sob, you can examine my soul see with your divine sense and you will soon realize that I have lost my chastity. Xianxia has stolen my chastity. Saintess Qian Yufeng gasped with shock, he took away your chastity, so you are now the Carnation Goddess. Saintess Xianfian shook her head, I am merely his lowly depraved slave and not his Carnation Goddess. Sister Saintess Yufeng, do you now know that I am actually trying to protect you from him? Saintess Qian Yufeng suddenly hummed with a soft giggle, do you think that I will believe you? Then she asked with a playful hint, how did you manage to become his depraved slave? I want to know too. Saintess Xianfian. Are you born to be a slut? She was completely exasperated. Saintess Qian Yufeng laughed, Sister Saintess Fian, are you thinking of monopolying Xianxia to yourself? Never. I hate him. Saintess Xianfian protested feebly. Saintess Qian Yufeng rolled her golden eyes, all our sister saintesses know that you love Xianxia the deepest. It is useless to deny this. And most of us think that if Xianxia is alive, you are also the one that Xianxia will look for first. And we are not wrong. Saintess Xianfian had a suddenly flush in her countenance, he has nowhere to go and I have taken him in my weak moment of kindness but I really didn't know that he is actually such a beast of a man. And I have fallen victim to him. Saintess Qian Yufeng hid one side of her countenance with her right hand with a look of disbelief. In the past when Xianfian was with Xianxia, she would always seize up when talking about Xianxia and denying that she likes him in front of the other 6 holy saintesses. But they all knew that she was lying because the minute that Xianxia was here, she would be all flustered and would be the first one to serve him. Even if she was a depraved slave of Xianxia now, she would be a willing depraved slave. Therefore Saintess Qian Yufeng decided to use another tactic as she smiled alluringly, I am sure that you don't want the other holy saintesses to know about Xianxia, am I right? How about I help you to keep it a secret? A flustered Saintess Xianfian murmured, huh? Saintess Qian Yufeng smiled, we keep Xianxia for the 2 of us, naturally. To show my sincerity, I will also allow Xianxia to remain in your holy maiden sanctuary. Saintess Xianfian was giggling softly now, this sounds like a good idea. Are you sure about this? Saintess Qian Yufeng was giggling softly, naturally I am serious about this. And by the way, I am moving in with you from this day onward. Saintess Xianfian was suddenly stammering all of a sudden, I have no room for you or your retinue. You can't do this. Or do you prefer that Xianxia is at my holy land instead? Saintess Qian Yufeng smiled playfully. I don't mind actually, then I can have Xianxia under my watchful eyes. Saintess Xiangfeiyue weakly said, when are you going to leave? Saintess Qian Yufeng smiled, Sister Saintess Fian, I can't believe that you will actually ask me when I am leaving. Once I move in with you, naturally I am not leaving anymore. I will move my entire holy land to merge with you naturally. Saintess Xiangfeiyue almost fainted on the same spot, you can't do this. This is my holy land and I am the rightful holy saintess of this place. Saintess Qian Yufeng giggled, or do you prefer a brutal fight to settle Xianxia once and for all? Or an alliance to keep the other holy saintesses out of this? To be honest, I have no real interest in any Carnation Goddess painting or even becoming a Carnation Goddess. Saintess Xianxia was startled. You don't want to be his Carnation Goddess. Saintess Qian Yufeng turned to look at her with a wry smile, for a 1/7 chance to be a Carnation Goddess. Are we stupid? Author note. 1. Happy New Year and 2023 everyone. Chapter 47 The New Holy Land. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Saintess Xianxia and Saintess Qian Yufeng were now sitting side by side in 2 throne seats at the great hall of the inner court now. Hundreds of senior protégés from both the Holy Maiden Sanctuary and the Verdant Rain Manor were stunned as they looked at their saintess. It was because these 2 holy saintesses had suddenly announced a merger of their holy lands, and the 2 of them would both rule the new Holy Land. As for the name of their new Holy Land, it would still be the Holy Maiden Sanctuary. This caught everyone by surprise and everyone was bewildered. Ednel.co Elder Hua Zixia and Nangong Shu were startled because all these had happened after a quick chat by the 2 holy saintesses. Even Fairy Yu Yuan was caught by surprise as her uncle the Divine Emperor Murong Jinshan was plotting against the Verdant Rain Manor and Saintess Qian Yufeng. Everyone was wondering what had actually happened. Saintess Xianxia was now looking at Saintess Qian Yufeng and she was sighing to herself. She had asked Saintess Qian Yufeng, "We are both saintesses and our cultivation strength are almost the same. It is really hard for us to know who is the inferior and the superior. However, this is my holy land and I have numerous cultivators with me while you have only a few. Therefore you have little chance against me." Saintess Qian Yufeng had merely smiled to her with a knowing look. "That is because you are Xianxia. The Fian that I know is most unwilling to fight with the other holy saintesses. If you have that little motivation to fight, then you won't have the smallest holy land among the 7 holy saintesses." Then with a wry smile she added, "And I also won't have the second smallest holy land. Therefore you won't attack me. Also, I am your sister Saintess Qian Yufeng and your closest friend. I just can't believe that you will break off our alliance just like this because you want to keep Shenlai to yourself." That was how Saintess Xianxia had agreed to the merger. Saintess Qian Yufeng had only one condition, and that was that she was staying put to where Shenlai was. Saintess Xianxia proclaimed the merger again. "From today onward, we will be ruling the Holy Maiden Sanctuary together. So I hope that all of you will get to know each other well from now onward." Saintess Qian Yufeng was also smiling as the merger proclamation. "We will naturally be making some small adjustments to the Holy Land due to the new merger, but most of stuff won't be changing." All of a sudden Saintess Qian Yufeng said quietly, "Who is that? Why don't you come out of your hiding place?" The intruder was not lost on Saintess Xianxia or Fairy Yu Yuan either. A beautiful voice had suddenly floated in, "Guess my stealth skill is still not good enough." An extremely beautiful and breathtaking maiden with a white sword had suddenly walked in, and almost everyone in this great hall was shocked. She was actually Fairy Xiangyun from the Saintess Palace, and she had the same renown as Fairy Yu Yuan here. She smiled, "My respects to the 2 holy saintesses. It seems that I have encountered a most joyous affair and I should report this to my holy saintess Beitang Fang." When Saintess Xianxia and Saintess Qian Yufeng saw that she was Fairy Xiangyun, their beautiful countenance was brooding. They had never expected the Saintess Palace to come so quickly. The 2 holy saintesses had decided on an alliance because they faced the constant threats of the powerful Saintess Palace, and this Fairy Xiangyun was also one of the main causes in leading several attacks on their holy lands. Now this Fairy Xiangyun was also a sword saintess, and she was also the direct successor to Holy Saintess Beitang Fang, and she was in possession of a fearsome saint-step divine sword and the powerful profound treasure that was known as the Lightning Scabbard. Her combat level was definitely not weak. And only Fairy Xiangyun would dare to come alone and not twitch in front of 2 holy saintesses and so many others. Saintess Xianxia smiled and said impolitely, "Is that all? If so, then you can leave now." When Saintess Qian Yufeng saw how untactful Saintess Xianxia was, she was shaking her head lightly with great awkwardness, but this was actually the Xianxia that she knew. Fairy Xiangyun knew that it was Saintess Xianxia's personality to be direct, and she was impolite to people that she did not like. So she simply smiled, aren't you going to ask me why I am here? Or to ask me to be your guest for a few days? Both Saintess Qian Yufeng and Saintess Xianxia said at the same time, why are you here? You can't stay here. Fairy Xiangyun was startled that these two holy saintesses had said the same thing. This further convinced her that they were up to something. So she smiled, my holy saintess Beitang Fong actually wants to send her sincere apologies for intruding into your holy lands. Therefore why don't you write down your grievous and we can reach a settlement. This was actually a lie and there was no such order. In fact she only had an order and that was to find Shen Lai and to kill him if it was possible. According to Saintess Beitang Fong, Shen Lai was supposed to be a cultivation cripple now. Fairy Xiang Yun as she looked at Saintess Xianxia and Saintess Qian Yufeng, or you prefer a open declaration of war against the Saintess Palace. Saintess Qian Yufeng weakly said, you can stay for a few days but only 3 days. Saintess Xianxia almost fainted as she stared at Saintess Qian Yufeng. This is my holy maiden sanctuary. You are all staying at my place without my permission. Saintess Qian Yufeng turned to look at her. It was as though she was saying, Shen Lai is in an experiential training now. As long as she don't see him, everything will be fine. Besides, it is only a short 3 days. What will actually go wrong? Author note. 1. Things are getting interesting here before we reverted back to Shen Lai and Jiaying. Chapter 48 Jiaying First time you are listening at novelfull.audio. It was night time in the Holy Maiden Sanctuary. A maiden with a night mask and in a night dress had quietly sneaked into the Celestial Sex Records chamber to check all the names of the protégés in the Holy Land of the Holy Maiden Sanctuary. This maiden was actually Fairy Xiang Yun. After a short while in the records chamber, she was quite startled to find Shen Lai's name among the protégés of the Holy Maiden Sanctuary and she had learnt that he was a new protégé. New protégé. Experiential training. She was startled Shen Lai was such an easy find. She had not expected to find Shen Lai in the Holy Maiden Sanctuary and were expecting to find a Shen Lai among the numerous celestial sects in the Holy Land of the Holy Maiden Sanctuary. She began to ponder slowly, I've killed some protégés during their experiential training. Maybe one of them is Shen Lai. No, I must go back to investigate. With this thought, she had sneaked away. Unknown to her, Fairy Yu Yuan had been secretly tagging on her and saw that Fairy Xiang Yun had changed into a night dress, only to sneak into the records chamber later. She began to wonder, what is she doing in there? Meanwhile back to Shen Lai and the experiential group 10. For 2 days, Jiaying had been avoiding Shen Lai while they trekked in the mountain wilderness. During these 2 days, the group did not encounter any dangers. There was a desolate beast or two but they were all low-level desolate beasts and had quickly fled at the sight of the 20 protégés. At the end of the 2nd day, Shen Lai had quietly approached Jiaying with a soft sigh when they were alone in the night. He said quietly, I am sorry. Jiaying hummed softly, please leave me alone. We have nothing to do with each other from now onward. Shen Lai had suddenly grabbed Jiaying's hand and he was inhaling deeply, I am really sorry. Please hear me out. Jiaying turned to look at him with sad countenance, do we still have anything to say? You can continue to look for your Carnation Goddess. Shen Lai sighed quietly, I would like to tell you a story. Do you want to listen to my story? Jiaying looked a little startled, your story. Shen Lai nodded slowly, that's right. My little story. When he saw that Jiaying had kept quiet, he began to say slowly. It is indeed tough for me to choose one Carnation Goddess from among 7 beautiful saintesses. I can only choose one of them. This is indeed a hard decision for me. Jiaying. Shen Lai explained slowly, actually in my heart, I have already decided on the one that I've liked the most. But she is not the Carnation Goddess. Jiaying looked at him slowly with a look of perplexation. Shen Lai sighed, I like Saintess Xianxia. Jiaying was startled, you like our Saintess. There was a look of disappointment in her eyes that it was not her that Xianxia had in his heart. But she glad that he had been honest with her. Xianxia laughed weakly, actually I like all 7 of them. Jiaying. Then why don't you marry all of them? She was only teasing him. It was impossible for Xianxia to know all 7 saintesses, and moreover he had the intention to ask them to strip for him. This was the most laughable thing that she had ever heard, but she was willing to listen to his story. Xianxia sighed, I can't. If I marry all 7 of them, I can't finish my Carnation Goddess painting and I can't be the highest realm cultivator in this divine realm anymore. Jiaying muttered, between cultivation realm or women, men will always choose cultivation realm as their priority. Xianxia nodded slowly, the day that I have chosen my Carnation Goddess is also the day that I must leave with my Tao partner. I need to say farewell to all of you. Then he turned to look at Jiaying, and I've also like you. Jiaying was suddenly flushing as she stared at him. She sighed softly, sometimes, I don't know if you are telling me the truth or not. Xianxia sighed softly as he recalled the day that he had met Saintess Xianxia, and once again, he already had a brooding feeling that she would not be willing to be his saintess for the Carnation Goddess painting. And that was why he had threatened her to be his depraved slave. It was actually not because of what the old man had said that he needed to increase his charms. And she rather be his depraved slave than partake in his Carnation Goddess painting. Jiaying said quietly, so the reason why you are not taking them all into your harem is because you can only bang those that is not the candidate for your Carnation Goddess painting. Xianxia nodded slowly. Jiaying asked again, so do you like me or not? Xianxia nodded slowly. He inhaled deeply before he said quietly. The truth is, if I can't complete my Carnation Goddess painting like the last time, my divine tribulation will punish me one way or another by crippling my cultivation core. Jiaying inhaled softly and she was startled, you will be crippled. She really could not believe what she was hearing, but it seemed to her that Xianxia seemed to be telling the truth. She looked at him with a soft look before finally saying, just for the end of this experiential training, I want you to forget that you are Xianxia. Just pretend that Xianxia is dead. This is only a small request for me. Can you do that? Xianxia muttered softly, just for a while, pretend that I am not Xianxia and that Xianxia is dead. I guess so. Just as he was about to ponder further, Jiaying had kissed him and they were suddenly rolling in the darkness. Jiaying muttered softly as she could feel Xianxia's rubs on her, tonight, let me be yours. Xianxia responded by lifting her skirt and pulling her panties off, maiden Jiaying, no matter what. I will make you into a saintess. Author note. 1. Xianxia must complete his Carnation Goddess painting or there will be terrible consequences. Chapter 49 Fairy Xiangyun, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. That very night, Xianxia and Jiaying got intimate. They had spent several hours in their passionate lovemaking. By now they were already used to each other's bodies and were comfortable with each other. It was a lucky thing that they were quite far away from their camp, it was because she had been speared many times by Xianxia and they were quite loud in their movements. Finally, Jiaying was flushing as she slept nakedly in Xianxia's embrace. She had given her first time to Xianxia. When Xianxia looked at her blushing cheeks, he saw that her beautiful eyes were full of tenderness and her whole body was dripping with sweat that exuded a faint fragrant scent which was extremely intoxicating. All of a sudden there was a swirl in Xianxia's head and it was noticed by Jiaying, who had noticed that Xianxia had a look of confusion in his eyes. What is wrong? Jiaying asked Xianxia and there was concern in her lovely eyes. Xianxia smiled gently, nothing. I've sensed something. Let me go and investigate it. Jiaying said with great tenderness, let me go with you too. Xianxia firmly said, it is all right. I can handle this. It is better that I go alone for I have a bad feeling about this. When he had said that, he had suddenly put on his robe and was gone in the next instant. Even if Jiaying had wanted to follow him, she could not see in the darkness. With a soft sigh, she slowly put on her clothing before returning to her campsite. Shenlai actually did not know what was affecting him this time. He sensed danger but it was not a danger. So he began to follow with his instinct and headed to the general direction where he had an uneasy feeling about. All of a sudden he saw a dark flash in front and was startled. An extremely beautiful cultivator had suddenly flashed in front of him and she was looking at him with a weird look. She had a beautiful coquettish look and was wearing a blue brocade dress with a short curvy skirt. Her neckline was low and it revealed her jade-white slender neck. Although she did not expose much of herself but she was really very attractive and her great beauty was extremely appealing. When she was near, Shenlai had immediately recognized that this maiden was the one that he had sensed a few days ago with his divine sense. At that time he was rescuing the experiential group 1 members and he had sensed her. But she had left immediately after he had killed all the beast men. She was the danger. He looked a little startled, his danger sense actually had never failed him. This extremely beautiful maiden was actually Fairy Xianxia and she had gone back to the mountains to look for Shenlai. When she saw this man that was in front of her, she was also startled because she had recognized him. What was he doing so late in the dark? She had remembered that he had a formidable fan that could take down dozens of beast men but she also knew that he was not a bad man because he had tried to save those maidens that were hanging on the trees. Fairy Xiangyun took a weird look at this beautiful man in front of him and said quietly, don't be afraid. I mean no harm. You are here for your experiential training, am I right? Shenlai nodded and he immediately answered, yes, I am. The experiential training will last for 7 days. This mountains is too dangerous for a beautiful maiden such as you. May I know who this beautiful maiden is and how may I address you? Fairy Xiangyun smiled. This handsome young man looks like a simpleton. He is actually worried about my safety. If I tell him that I am Fairy Xiangyun or Sword Saintess Xiangyun, I bet that his legs will become jelly. But she asked instead, before I tell you who I am, can you tell me your name and answer a question from me? Shenlai said casually, all right. Sure. Fairy Xiangyun smiled, what is your name? Before she asked him about Shenlai, she would ask him about his name first. This was actually a little ruse on her side. By not asking about Shenlai first, she was eliminating a possibility that this young man in front of her was Shenlai. Shenlai had suddenly remembered that Jiaying had told him he was not Shenlai for the rest of the experiential training and that he had to treat Shenlai as a dead person for the duration of the experiential training as well. So he answered nonchalantly, I am Lai Qingming. He had randomly thought of a name for himself. Fairy Xiangyun smiled as she nodded, this young man had a stable heartbeat so he was not lying. She asked again, then do you have a fellow protege that is named Shenlai here? Shenlai sighed softly, it is most unfortunate for you, young maiden. But he is dead. Fairy Xiangyun was startled, he is really dead. She was gasping too because she may have killed him by accident. However, Shenlai may have perished in the mountain wilderness as well. According to her Saintess Beitang Fong, Shenlai had his cultivation crippled and he was likely to be a low-level cultivator now. So there was a possibility that Shenlai may have died in this experiential training and that not even Saintess Xianxia knew about his existence. Shenlai was now bowing respectfully with his hands, may I know maiden's name so that I can accord maiden with the proper respect. Fairy Xiangyun was flushing lightly at this polite and beautiful young man, Yun Xiang is my name. I am just passing through these woods and this place is indeed a little dangerous for me. She had purposely told him a lie about herself as she did not want him to know that she was the renowned Fairy Xiangyun. Shenlai bowed with his hands respectfully again, Maiden Yun Xiang. I am pleased to know you. Fairy Xiangyun laughed softly, why are you so pleased to know me? Shenlai said without any hesitation, Maiden Yun Xiang is the most beautiful maiden that I have ever met. Naturally I am pleased to know you. Fairy Xiangyun flushed as she smiled, really? Shenlai answered firmly, really. Fairy Xiangyun smiled coyly, how about your Saintess Xianxia? She is said to be the most beautiful maiden in your holy land. Shenlai shook his head. Unfortunately, she is only second to maiden Xianxiang. Fairy Xiangyun was curious but was secretly pleased. Why is that so? Shenlai smiled gently. My saintess is sometimes quite fierce, so her beauty cannot be compared to maiden Xianxiang. Fairy Xiangyun was now flushing more than ever as she answered quietly, thank you for your praises. All of a sudden Shenlai had pulled her hands and had startled her. What are you doing? Shenlai answered nonchalantly, let's go. This place is really too dangerous for a heavenly maiden like you to be alone. You can join my group. Fairy Xiangyun was gasping silently as she could feel the warmth of Lai Qingming's palm that was on her palm. Author note. 1. I know the twist is funny here. X. Chapter 50 Fairy Xiangyun. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fairy Xiangyun was now walking with Shenlai and they were now walking hand in hand. As they walked, she could not help looking at this Lai Qingming who was as handsome as a beautiful picturesque scenery. She was indifferent by nature and did not care for any man. For this lofty and peerless delicate beauty, the love and affection of men in this world was really dispensable and unsuitable to be of any value to her cultivation. When men held her with a strong and forbearing appraising gaze, it was only because they wanted to take her into their possession and to cherish a look from her, but she was always indifferent to their praises. She had another nickname and that was Sword Saintess Xiangyun. She was as cold and indifferent as her divine sword. There was only one small step for her to become a true saintess and she did not want to be distracted in her pursuit. If she fails to overcome her breakthrough, either she may die or she will enter the fake saintess realm. She had one competitor and that was actually Fairy Yushuwen who was also at the awakened realm as her. Like her, Fairy Yushuwen was a peaked awakened cultivator. So it was like a contest between the two of them, these two alluring fairies on who would be the first one to be a true saintess. Even when Lai Qingming had told her his name, she had lied to her about her real name and had called herself Xianxiang instead. The more she looked at Shenlai, the flusher her countenances had become. She was slowing her pace down because she had just realized that she was in the wilderness to look for Shenlai and that her mission was done. Shenlai was dead now and she could at least report back to her saintess Beitang Fang. And it was all thanks to this gullible Lai Qingming here who had given her the information. However, there was something that she still had a doubt on, and that was the feathered fan that Lai Qingming had. He had used this feathered fan to beaten off the hordes of beastmen, and needless to say, this feathered fan of his was extremely powerful. So she asked him, Cultivator Qingming, I see that this feathered fan that you have with you is most unusual. This must be a most formidable secret weapon, am I right? She began to wonder if he would lie to her about this feathered fan of his. Shenlai laughed as he putted the feathered fan into her hands. If you like this fan of mine, you may have it. It is actually a fan that can shoot out hundreds of secret projectiles. However, it can only be used only once, and unfortunately, very recently, I have already used it. Therefore this formidable fan is now just a normal feather fan. When he said that, he looked a little awkward. Fairy Xiangyun was startled that he had actually given her this feathered fan so casually. And he did not lie to her about the use of this feathered fan. Her thoughts were that she could try a way to actually obtain this feathered fan for the Saintess Palace, and then it may even be useful to know the inner workings of this feathered fan. It was just that she did not expect that he would have given her this feathered fan in such a casual manner and explained to her its functions. She gasped softly as she looked with a weird look at the feathered fan that she had just obtained. Well, thank you. It was almost time for her to go now. All of a sudden they had come to a dead end in the mountains. It was actually all too easy for her to jump up and even scale this steep dead end, but it would betray her cultivation realm as she would need to release her profound animus. This was something that she did not want Lai Qingming to know, lest he may report it back to the Holy Maiden Sanctuary and he would then learn about her identity. There was suddenly a hand on her back waist as he said quietly, it seems that we have come to a dead end. Fairy Xiangyun was gasping all of a sudden as she felt his hand on her back. This was the very first time that a man had touched her on her back and she could suddenly feel that she was moist below. What was this feeling that she was experiencing now? She quickly turned around to say, I suddenly remember that I have something to do. I ought to go now. Xianxia looked a little disappointed when he had heard her. We are going to part now. Fairy Xianxia smiled, what's wrong with it? We are but strangers in the first place. Xianxia paused to ponder for a while. He was actually here because he had thought that he had sensed something dangerous, but his danger sense was no longer tingling now. Therefore, he should be going back to his own campsite by now. He took a look at this most astonishing beautiful maiden that was like a heavenly fairy and said heartfeltly, it is quite sad to leave such a great beauty like you alone in this place. He had wanted to ask her if she was interested to be his Carnation Goddess, but he had remembered that he had promised Jiaying that he must now forget that he was Xianxia until the end of the experiential training. What he wanted to do for now, he must not mention it for the time being. Fairy Xianxia returned a wry smile, I will be safe. I am a higher level cultivator than you. Xianxia sighed softly, these wilderness is actually not safe. All of a sudden there was a strong cold breeze that rushed from the darkness of where they were in this mountain wilderness. Fairy Xianxia gasped softly at the strong cold breeze and she had suddenly found herself in the warm embrace of Lai Qingming and she could suddenly feel that her bosoms were being pressed by his firm body. Xianxia was also surprised to see such a peerless fairy in his arm and he could not shake away the lust that was within him. Soon he was feeling her smooth naked thighs and under her short skirt. Although Fairy Xianxia was startled by his actions, she did not move for she was suddenly mesmerized by his actions and she was worried that he may discover that her panties were all wet now and she was dripping lewd juices. But Xianxia had already discovered that he was rubbing her panties from below. But all he could say was, you are really a most beautiful maiden. And then he was already pulling down her wet panties. Soon, he had also loosened her belt and was pulling down her bodice below, exposing her beautiful small but perked nipples in the cool night. Noel.N. Lai Qingming was soon fondling her breasts and kissing her breasts passionately. Fairy Xianxia was dizzy and could not believe what she was doing in this place. She had wanted to protest but she seemed to have found her willpower. It was especially more when Lai Qingming, Xianxia, had stripped naked in front of her and she was looking down below at his firm dragon rod for the very first. She found herself grabbing his dragon rod and even feeling him below. These were the things that she could not even imagine herself doing so in the past. Lai Qingming had suddenly said to her, please turn around so that I can admire you. Fairy Xianxia found herself turning around with a flustered look and she knew that he was now lifting her skirt and looking at her two forbidden holy valleys. And at the same time, he was fondling her breasts and gasping with admiration, this is so beautiful. Maiden Xiang, may I have your body, he was heard saying. Fairy Xianxia could not believe she was actually saying to him with a light nod, just be gentle with me and don't hurt me. Author note. 1. I was ill for some time.